Remember never to assert yourself against nature. Never be in frontal opposition to any problems, but to control it by swinging with it. Bruce Lee. Welcome to EOS Weekly. We haven't paid much attention to EOSForce yet, but it's a sister chain that's been quietly gaining momentum in the East over the past several months, and we can't ignore this project any longer. In this week's episode, we're going to look at what EOSForce is, and in many cases we'll compare EOSForce to Telos. The two chains are predominantly operated by communities in the different hemispheres, Telos in the West and EOSForce in the East. And it's interesting to see the cultural differences reflected in the approach these two chains took in some of their governance structures and tokenomics. Starting out with a localized regional group of BPs has its advantages. We all saw firsthand how quickly the Telos launch group was able to move forward, making decisions and executing on their vision. It's a group of people who share common language and cultural values. The EOS Mainnet has a global presence, which is the long-term goal for all of these chains. But in the early stage, when a chain is struggling with some foundational types of questions, like whether to have base layer arbitration, whether to have a worker proposal system, and how to prevent cartels from forming, a global presence can be a hindrance. Look at the EOS Alliance workshops on drafting the Constitution. The process is moving very slowly while they deal with cultural and language barriers between East and West. Meanwhile, Telos has a fully fleshed out and ratified constitution, which they call the Telos Blockchain Network Operating Agreement. EOSForce is moving forward with a similar momentum as Telos, unimpeded by cultural and language barriers. EOSForce appears to have a powerhouse of an engineering team behind them. At least this is their claim. They describe themselves as the only team that is able to develop on the fundamental level of the EOSIO codebase outside of Block 1. You can see the EOSForce codebase here on GitHub, and they are quite active. Over the past month, you can see here that 13 authors have pushed 119 commits to master, with 194 files changed, 7,000 in some additions and 60,000 deletions. Compare that to Telos, where over the past month, Telos has 12 authors pushing 12 commits to master, 162 files changed, with 8,500 additions and 6,000 deletions. Here's the side-by-side. So, compared to Telos, EOSForce has a similar level of activity, arguably more activity. It's difficult to assess the quality of these code enhancements at this point, time will tell, but EOSForce has an extremely ambitious roadmap for 2019 in terms of their code enhancements to the EOSIO codebase. And if they are able to deliver on what they're planning here, well, that would show that their engineering prowess is in fact as good as they claim. In terms of collaboration and forward momentum, what we may be witnessing here with Telos and EOSForce is the ideal level of localization for blockchains at this early stage, where they start out local to a certain hemisphere or region of the world, and then, once they've gotten the foundational elements in place, only then do they venture out to the other regions, gradually spreading to a global presence. There was concern back in early 2018, before we had any EOSIO chains, before we knew how the launch would play out, that we'd get multiple chains spinning up simultaneously, with a particular concern that there'd be a clear division between the East and the West. Nobody wanted this. We all wanted one main EOS chain. It's possible that we got the best of all worlds with the current situation. We do have our one global EOS mainnet, but at the same time we have a primary chain representing Western values and a primary chain representing Eastern values. And as we've emphasized in past episodes, the EOS mainnet community can watch these experimental chains and pick and choose which features they see working to draw into the codebase, strengthening the EOS mainnet. So now that we've gotten the backstory of EOSForce out of the way, let's get into the meat of this chain. What is EOSForce, and how is it different from the EOS mainnet and Telos? EOSForce is making changes to both the tokenomics as well as the underlying architecture of the EOSIO software. Let's look at both of these, starting with the tokenomics changes. When it comes to BP elections, EOSForce has introduced a concept called the voter dividend incentive. Whereas on the EOS Mainnet and on Telos, 1% inflation goes towards compensating block producers for their services. On EOSForce, the payment is split between the BPs and the voters who elected them. It's sort of like EOSForce has not only embraced vote buying, but made it a mandatory, fundamental aspect of their governance structure. The voters who voted for a given BP take in a portion of the block rewards. The voter reward is based on how many tokens they voted towards a given BP and how long they've had those tokens going towards the BP. What EOSForce has done here is they've aligned incentives such that token holders, the voters, are rewarded for identifying the underappreciated BPs. By helping to promote those underappreciated BPs into a rewards earning spot, the voter earns more than if he or she had simply voted for one of the BPs that were already at the top of the list. This could bring a healthy amount of churn in BP elections and gives the underdog BPs a fair chance at moving up in the ranks. If you vote for an active BP who's already in one of the top spots, your share of the rewards are less. But if you get in early in helping to get a standby BP into an active spot, you earn more. Compare this with Rex, where it'll help encourage people to vote, but they don't have to put any thought into it at all. With Rex, you can mindlessly choose a set of BPs, and as long as you go through the actual process of voting, you earn the same dividend as those who did put a lot of thought into their voting, assuming the two are voting with the same number of tokens. With the EOSForce model, the thoughtful voters who put more effort into their BP research and make intelligent selections, those voters will end up earning more over the long run when compared with the mindless voter. And also, in terms of the number of tokens earned, EOSForce is far more generous towards voters than Rex will be. With the EOSForce model, the reward split between voters and BPs is 70-30. So 70% of block rewards are distributed among the voters, and the remaining 30% goes to the BPs. How has this voter dividend incentive impacted voter turnout? According to EOSForce, they have more than 90% voter participation. Let's repeat that. EOSForce has more than 90% voter participation. It's remarkable what EOSForce has done here. So let's pause for a second to digest this. What they've done here is straight out of what they teach you in martial arts, to use your opponent's force against them. EOSForce has taken the negative aspect of vote buying and turned it on its head. Instead of letting vote buying be a tool that whales utilize to buy the network and form cartels, EOSForce has turned vote buying into a tool that destroys cartels. With EOSForce's tokenomics, the general populace is so incentivized to vote intelligently for BPs that the populace votes in droves, with more than a 90% turnout, taking nearly all power away from the whales. This is a beautiful thing. The entire EOS community should be watching this very closely to see if it continues to work out as well in practice as it does on paper, because this has the potential to be an absolute game changer. EOSForce wrote out a detailed description of their formulas for the election tokenomics, and this document is linked below. Something we should note while looking at this document is the one-for-one voting. With both the EOS Mainnet and with Telos, you can vote with your same tokens for up to 30 block producers. So if you have 10 tokens in your account, you can apply those same 10 tokens towards 30 BPs. Telos takes this a step further and encourages you to vote for the max 30 with their inverse weighted voting. With Telos, if you don't vote for the max of 30, the weighting of your vote is diminished. EOSForce went the complete opposite direction. They took away the multiplier. With their one-for-one voting, you can only cast one token vote against one BP. So if we go with the same number of 10 tokens as our previous example, you could do something like 5-3-1-1, and then you're done. So that's what EOSForce means when they say one-for-one voting. They took away the multiplier. The next difference we want to cover with the tokenomics of EOSForce is the resource model, meaning how developers go about procuring resources to use the network. On Telos and the EOS Mainnet, we have the feeless transaction model with staking and the RAM market, and coming soon the rental model with Rex. EOSForce did away with all of this and instead went with the Ethereum model of putting fees on transactions. It's similar to the rental model that Rex will bring to the table soon, but with EOSForce, this is the out-of-the-box way that it works. Because the EOSForce network will be earning fees from transactions, and those fees will be used to pay the BPs and the voters, it's hard to say yet how much inflation EOSForce will have. If they weren't bringing in any transaction fees, our math shows that inflation would be at around 9%. This may sound high, but keep in mind that this is not counting transaction fees, and the majority of any inflation will be going back in the token holders' pockets, assuming they vote. But, being that EOSForce is collecting transaction fees, the amount of inflation will end up being less than that 9% number. How much less depends on how much usage the network is getting from dApps and their users. Okay, now that you're starting to see how interesting this EOSForce project is, the next question you're probably asking yourself is whether you've got any ownership in this blockchain. So let's talk about the Genesis Snapshot. EOSForce did respect the same Genesis Snapshot from the original EOS ICO. So if you participated in the ICO, you do have tokens waiting for you on EOSForce. The base tokens on EOSForce are called EOSC, which stands for EOS Coin. You can access them through Scatter. This is the EOSForce website, which is eosforce.io, and the button at the top here will bring you to this step-by-step guide on configuring EOSForce in Scatter. If we go back to their website now, if you scroll down here towards the bottom, you will get to the part where you'll see the other wallets that support EOSForce, as well as the exchanges where the EOSForce token is traded. Of course, none of this is financial advice. We are not financial advisors, so purchase this at your own risk. Now, let's move on to the architectural aspects of EOSForce. EOSForce is working on building what they call a multi-layered architecture, which actually has a lot of similarities to the vision portrayed by the Bytemaster in his Dawn 4.0 post, where he describes a main chain where the base tokens and elections are held, and side chains spun up for horizontal scaling. EOSForce is hard at work turning the Bytemaster's vision here into a reality. The terminology EOSForce uses is this. They have the main layer, the relay layer, and the app chains. The main layer is similar to the mainnet, where base tokens and smart contracts reside and elections are held. The relay layer is like the IBC solution, connecting the main layer to the app chains. And finally, you've got the app chains, which is like the side chains. This is where the applications are deployed. EOSForce has borrowed from two main IBC protocols in their multi-chain design. One is Cosmos and the other is Polkadot. Most of their more recent terminology, though, maps more closely to Polkadot than to Cosmos, so it seems like the Polkadot solution is the direction they're heading. The great news here is that EOSForce is going to be putting a lot of their engineering brainpower towards IBC. It's a fundamental part of their multi-layer vision, and you see it right here in their roadmap. This is going to be a huge learning opportunity for the wider EOS ecosystem, because if EOSForce does succeed in their IBC implementation, we could potentially use the same model to connect all the sister chains together. In fact, we might not even need to replicate EOSForce's IBC solution. The relay chain architecture that they are proposing here would theoretically let any blockchain join in, even non-EOSIO chains like Bitcoin and Ethereum. So if this works, we could potentially plug all the other EOSIO chains into this exact same relay chain network that EOSForce is already building without needing to replicate it, enabling all of them to talk with each other. EOSForce is already live. They launched on June 22nd around the same time as the EOS Mainnet, and EOSForce launched with limited functionality. They've gradually been turning features on over time once they feel it's safe to do so. You can access one of their block explorers from their website here and see blocks being produced and also see who the active BPs are. As we've been talking about throughout this episode, the current set of BPs are primarily based out of Asia, but it would be great to see some of our Western BPs get involved with EOSForce. As we've mentioned in past episodes, some BPs like EOS Metal and EOS Detroit are forming a presence across all the public chains. EOSForce could be the next logical step in their expansion, a good strategic move, in our opinion. Once on the inside, these BPs could serve as a liaison to help the rest of us in the Western Hemisphere to better understand the inner workings of EOSForce. EOSForce is expressing interest in getting this type of involvement from the Western BPs, as you can see in this recent Medium post. They are building a presence on Twitter and in Telegram. Hopefully we'll start to see more of a Western presence on EOSForce in the months ahead. If you do have any questions about EOSForce, the best way to get those questions answered is to contact them directly in their Telegram channel. The link is in the show notes below. That's it for this week's episode. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done so already. We'll help you stay current on EOS as this revolution unfolds. Thanks, and we'll see you next week right here on EOS Weekly.